The New Orleans Pelicans have found their lead guard as they swung a massive trade for Dejounte Murray from the Atlanta Hawks. I'll tell you how this makes the Pelicans better and why it means another, maybe even bigger trade is coming soon. It's a bonus instant reaction episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcast and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday night, Saturday, whenever you're listening. It's a bonus instant reaction episode to the Pelicans trading for Dejounte Murray. This was a big deal, so we're going to break it all down for you here. How Murray fits in with the Pelicans, why they made this trade, how it makes them better, but also what's coming next? What's their salary cap situation? What's the next move to fall? Because there absolutely is going to be not just one move, but multiple moves. Then we'll look at a couple of other kind of fallout pieces from this trade in the third segment. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you wanted to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and share the podcast with some friends because they're going to want to know what's going on with this team because it is exciting right now. Today's episode, bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans, is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Playoffs are done. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So if you follow me on X, social media, at NOLA Jake, you're probably laughing at me because I was on a plane, when this trade broke, and I'd kind of heard that something was coming, and I was like, of course it's going to happen, when I'm 36,000 feet up in the air, and it did. So I'm recording this like as soon as I can after that. Landed, basically first thing I'm doing is recording this show for you because the news is that big, and we're going to have a lot more next week on this too. We'll have a lot more on Yves Missi and Antonio Reeves and the Pelicans offseason plans because it's just getting started. But I want to say this. I've told y'all something was coming. If you're an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans, this move should somewhat surprise you because it's cheaper than what we expected, and we'll get into that here. But I saw a lot of people panicking, and I was like, don't do that. The offseason is just underway. It's why I did yesterday's show talking about how David Griffin was like, we're not going to be an apron team, and a lot of people took that the really wrong way because they didn't understand it. We'll get more into the salary cap stuff here with all of that. But if you're an everydayer, or if you're not an everydayer, you should be one because you kind of understand a lot of what's going on here. So let's break down the trade. Dejounte Murray coming to New Orleans, going to the Atlanta Hawks. It's 3 players. Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and EJ Liddell, along with 2 picks. The 2025 Lakers pick next season, and the worst of the Pelicans picks with theirs or the Bucks pick in 2027. So the Pelicans will have the better pick of those. This is a pretty good deal. Now, it's essentially 3 first-round picks for Dejounte Murray. Basically what they traded, the Atlanta Hawks traded to the Atlanta Hawks for him. Now, their own picks, those Hawks picks are valuable, so this is a net loss for them. But overall, they didn't really lose any picks, and for them, that's a good deal. But this is also a great trade for New Orleans because, one, they had a big need at the point guard position, which Murray is expected to fill. And 2, they didn't have to part with Brandon Ingram. More on kind of what's next, Ingram, CJ McCollum, the salary cap in the next segment here. But this is overall a very, very good deal for New Orleans. Any kind of trade we had talked about, and I was even on Locked On NBA with our Hawks host talking about this week, seemed like it would involve Brandon Ingram, Dejounte Murray, and then one of the centers for the Atlanta Hawks. And not in Okongwu or Capella, their 2 centers, aren't guys that I'm like exceedingly high on. If you got one, sure. I don't love Capella's contract, even if it's expiring. But this move to keep Brandon Ingram, knowing you can trade him later or even re-sign him, is a great piece of business. This is why the Pelicans believed in their plan, promoted Bryson Graham to the general manager position vacated by Trajan Langdon. This is why David Griffin, after the draft said the offseason has just started. Our roster doesn't need to be set. You don't need to get anything done on draft night. And that's why I said have some patience. That's why I also said I do think they're going to get expensive because this team's going into the luxury tax this year. There's almost no way of getting around it. So enough of the breakdown of the trade. This is a good deal for New Orleans. I don't doubt that at all. We'll miss Larry. We'll miss Dyson. We'll talk about them in a minute. But this is a good move by New Orleans that leaves all of the options open. If you're a Pelicans fan, you should be happy about this sort of thing. So let's look at Murray. How does he fit? Why did they make this trade? Why did they pick him over Trae Young? So one, I don't really think Trae Young was on the table. Murray was the guy that New Orleans has long coveted going back to the trade deadline where they tried to acquire him. I thought it would cost more than what they did. This is, again, a good piece of business for the Pelicans here. This was the guy they like, and I think it's partially because they envision him in the backcourt with CJ McCollum. Murray has good size at 6'5", can defend multiple positions, and even though his defense has gone down a little bit since he's been in Atlanta, this is a former All-Star who had a reputation as one of the better defensive guards in the league. He's also a very good rebounder too. More on that in the next segment. So you get him and you compare him, you can put him with CJ McCollum in the backcourt and you feel good enough defensively there. I think that's why the Pelicans decided to really push hard for Murray, that they view him as a guy that does pair well with CJ McCollum, which hints a little bit at the future plans here. So he's going to be your starting point guard. He's going to be in the starting lineup. Now, Zion Williamson will still handle the ball a lot, but the last time that Murray was kind of the lead guy on a team was with the San Antonio Spurs. I don't know what I was about to call them there. 21.1 points per game, 9.2 assists, and 8.3 rebounds. That's pretty close to putting up a triple-double stat line. That's a pretty great thing. I'm trying to look up his numbers without Trae Young right now, and I should have gotten that up. Let's see what they come up with. Dejounte Murray without Trae Young. He averaged, let's say this season, because that's not helpful. It gave me his career numbers without Trae, which is more. Without Trae Young in the lineup this year, he averaged 21.5 points, 9.1 assists, and 5.8 rebounds in 28 games without Trae Young. He's very much capable of being your lead guard and dishing the ball out. And this is what New Orleans has been looking for a little while here. They have a Zion-centric offense, and they're worried about that. They were worried about this going into last season. That's why they redid the offense and put Zion off ball more. And the idea was, well, if Zion gets hurt, our offense falls apart because it's built around him. Inherently, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but having some insurance, which they didn't have this past season, makes a lot of sense. So while you will still see Zion be point Zion a lot, Murray is going to be handling the rock and kind of setting guys up. At times in Atlanta, he has been a little bit of a ball stopper, not a black hole, but stops the ball from moving a little bit. I wonder if that's because he was paired with Trae Young and the pairing just didn't work. They had a negative net rating. And coming to New Orleans where he can be more of that primary facilitator, not kind of taking time off or splitting time, even though he will with Zion, it's very different than playing with Trae Young. I think that's going to kind of rejuvenate him here. I think he's going to go back to being that terror defensively and fit right into the Pelicans' 6th-ranked defense from the past 2 seasons. That final year when he was playing really good defense in San Antonio, he averaged 2 steals per game. I believe that led the league from the guard position. Those are numbers that New Orleans looks at and goes, oh yeah, our identity is on the defensive side of the ball. Now we get to put him in there. That's going to work. That's going to work exceedingly well. He can get you a bucket. And New Orleans, who struggled in clutch and crunch situations, they're the same thing this season. 0 for 24 when trailing, entering the fourth quarter, whatever the number was. Really struggling in close games. You now have a table setter, your point guard to set up others and give Zion a break. I think part of the plan here is, or the hope here is, that with someone else to really handle the ball at a high level, and you're taking some of that pressure off of Zion Williamson, Maybe that keeps him healthier, right? Does that make him a little bit fresher in the fourth quarter? Does it keep him fresher over an 82-game season? He answered a lot of those kind of health-related questions this past year, but now maybe you won't see him kind of tired at the end of games because there's someone to take the load off of him. This is a good fit. There are some concerns around that. There are some concerns with Murray. He's going to need to change some things because, look, this doesn't address three-point shooting totally for the Pelicans. The shot selection leaves a little bit to be desired, but I think you're moving for this guy knowing that those things are going to improve. So let's look at kind of what's next. What needs to change from Murray for him to be the perfect fit here? What's next with Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, the salary cap situation? Who's going to start at center? All of that's coming up here next in today's bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, this bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by my favorite eBay Motors. It's my favorite because my cars are running, driving, looking awesome because of eBay Motors. I'm restoring an old classic, near 50-year-old Corvette. Not the easiest thing to find parts for, and I don't have any trouble with eBay Motors because with over 122 million parts, you're always going to find what you're looking for. Old car, no problem. Newer car, they totally got it. Daily driver, it's going to keep you on the road. What I love is the eBay's guaranteed fit. It means your part is going to fit right the first time and every time, or you get your money back. I've ordered parts from kind of sketchy places. Doesn't exactly fit. It's not like the OEM stock what you want. And then you just got to order something else. Just get the part that's going to fit. And eBay Motors is going to have that there for you. If you just want to add more utility to your vehicle, a roof rack, LED headlights, they have it as well. So whether you're into speed, power, style, they've got you covered. And my favorite part, why I keep ordering from them, other than all of the other awesome stuff, is that their prices are great. You're burning rubber, not cash with eBay Motors. So keep your vehicle alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube and become an everydayer. And if you are an everydayer, you kind of knew something like this was going to be coming because we talked about it here. Knowing that David Griffin's comments saying they're not going to be an apron team meant they were still going to be aggressive. We weren't panicking. We weren't screaming, anything like that. Just giving you the insight you want that you can't get anywhere else. So please tell a friend about the show as well. So let's get into a little bit more about Dejounte Murray. David Griffin saying we are not going to be complacent, keeping up in the Western Conference. He was very correct about that, wasn't he here? So this move does definitely do that, but it's not, well, I think it's a very good trade. If you're giving this, a grade, it's like an A- at worst for New Orleans. You didn't give up Brandon Ingram. You retain all the flexibility from that. And now you can still go forward and totally remake your team. This opens up so many other moves now that you've addressed one of the two biggest needs you had, which was the guard position, getting a lead guard in. This is just phenomenal work, I think, by the Pelicans front office. So Murray, though, isn't perfect. He can be, but there's a couple of things to kind of keep an eye out. One, he is at times a good three-point shooter, but can be a little bit streaky. One of the things that I like about him is his three-point attempts have gone basically up every single season. From his final 2 seasons in San Antonio in the past 4 years, it's gone from 3 attempts to 4.3 to 5.2 to 7.1. He is not an elite shooter. Last season was basically the best three-point shooting season he's had at 36.3%. That is not an elite number, but he will take threes and he will make threes. And that's kind of the important thing. Is this an answer to spacing for New Orleans? No, I don't think it is. And so that leads other questions, which we'll look at in a little bit here, about who starts alongside him, CJ, Zion, and the presumed center. Is it Trey? Is it Herb? Because you do need another shooter in that lineup. Could be from the center spot. We'll see what they end up doing here. But he doesn't completely address the need for more shooting within the starting lineup. Now, he could probably get up to 10 attempts per game. Playing with Zion, he's going to have these wide open looks. So I think this still remains to be an open question, but but I don't think just on the surface of it, we can say it's answered right now. It certainly could be by the end of the regular season. He's going to get wide open looks. You take those, you make those. Teams will eventually, it'll take a minute, start defending you on the three-point line and add some of that spacing for Zion. So I like that. One of the things, though, he does, this is the complaint we have about Brandon Ingram, a lot of it too, is a lot of his shots come from mid-range. A lot of his shots come from mid-range. Now, he has done a good job of increasing that three-point percentage being like the shot diet, but he needs to cut out some of those mid-range shots. It's near 40% of his shots are about mid-range shots. 38% come from three, but he needs to work on getting to the rim. Now, the good thing is he's got good size. We've seen him do this in the past with the San Antonio Spurs. His second year in the league, 41% of his shots basically came within the restricted area. It was just 17% last season. That number has gone down a little bit, while the three-point shooting numbers have gone up. But you want him to kind of change that shot profile some, to attack the basket more, to shoot more threes. He likes to settle for those mid-range jumpers. That's the big complaint we have about Brandon Ingram. So he's going to need to change that. But again, I think this is the type of guy that's willing to do that. He tried to change his play style alongside, Trae Young. It just didn't work with that team. But I think coming here, he's going to have a bit of a new lease on life and kind of know what his role is going to be. And I think he's going to embrace it. I also, for the record, think Brandon Ingram would have changed his shot profile going in if he remains on the Pelicans this season. I do think that'll change from him too. I think that's something that's going to be made very, very clear for this team. So that's the one minor concern I have. I think the defense is going to get back to being elite from him. I think you're going to see him get steals. And if the Pelicans do manage to get even more rim protection beyond Yves Missi, he's going to be able to really kind of do that. He is elite in transition too. Him and Zion leading the fast break is going to be really fun. So now the question becomes, and this one's fun, what's next? I think it's been made pretty clear they see him starting alongside CJ McCollum, that he makes up for some of CJ's deficiencies. And this allows CJ to be off ball where he thrived last year, becoming one of the better shooters in the league. I think the Pelicans love this idea, and I like it too. The question then becomes Brandon Ingram. He is much more likely to be traded than CJ McCollum. And I said this on the show the other day. I do think CJ has more value here in New Orleans than he does anywhere else around the league. So I don't expect him to be moved. But this likely means that Brandon Ingram is going to be traded away, and that's how this team is going to acquire a center in some capacity. Maybe they trade him for picks, and then you use those picks to get a center, or you trade him for the center. Is it Jared Allen? Is it DeAndre Ayton? Those are the type of things that I think the Pelicans are still working on right now, but there will be a new starting center. And while as before I was saying maybe they go cheap with that, you don't have to anymore. They're actually in a pretty good salary cap position after this trade because Murray's deal is very, very good. Next year, he's going to make $28.279 million. So I ran the numbers into my Pelicans cap spreadsheet here. So after this trade, they are about, and this is all like, I might be off a smidge on some of these numbers. They are $4.74 million under the luxury tax. This gives them access to the full non-taxpayer mid-level exception. I have the numbers wrong on this the other day, which starts at $12.9 million next season. Remember when here on Locked On Pelicans, we did not panic over Griffin saying they are not going to be an apron team. They are actually hard capped, which I said, don't worry about. They are hard capped at the tax apron, the first apron, by sending out multiple guys, aggregating salaries. They cannot go above that number. So when Griffin said we are not going to be an apron team, it just meant they were going to make moves that prevent that from happening. What I told you literally yesterday happened today. They are hard capped at the apron. Does not mean that they're not going to spend. It does not mean that they are not going to go into the luxury tax. It just means they're literally not going to be allowed to go above that number, so they can't be an apron team. There you go. Griffin was very much correct and then still aggressive here. They have about $12 million to the first apron threshold, and that's with Brandon Ingram on the roster right now. So they can't spend, as of today, that full non-taxpayer mid-level exception. they can spend $12 million of the 12.9, nearly the full thing. They have 3 open roster spots right now. And this also isn't factoring in the numbers for Antonio Reeves till we see what that comes in. So they probably have a little bit less than the $12 million because you're going to need to factor his salary in too. So they still have to fill 3 roster spots. And I would not be shocked that if Brandon Ingram is traded, if multiple players come back in exchange for him. So you can still trade Brandon Ingram $36 million and bring in players equal to that and still have about, let's call it $11 million to spend in free agency to fill out your roster for, as of now, 3 spots, potentially, fewer than that if you bring 2 players back in a Brandon Ingram trade. The Pelicans are, at this point, I've said long on this show that I expect them maybe to go into the luxury tax, $5 million. I think they're going to do the whole thing. I think they're going to push really close to that first apron. So it's about $7 million into the luxury tax, more than kind of what we were expecting them to do. Kind of cool, right? Like let's be happy about this. They're spending, they're going for it. He clearly has the green light from ownership to go and spend some money. Now, I'm sure they would probably spend more if they could. They're just not allowed to per the CBA, per the collective bargaining agreement. Now, if you also trade Brandon Ingram and bring back less salary, which can happen, you can spend that full 12.9. You also then have the biannual exception, which is even more. So if they trade Brandon Ingram and say bring $30 million worth of salary back, you could spend that 12.9 non-taxpayer mid-level exception and potentially the biannual exception, which is much, much smaller and only for a 2-year deal. And you could do that. So they have ways to really add some pieces. It is a middling free agent class. So, again, I don't know if they're really going to do that. We kind of were like, Andre Drummond would be a big-time player in free agency for New Orleans. Think bigger. That's what this opens up. Think bigger than that. This is a Jared Allen kind of trade, right? Jared Allen, Max Strus, we've heard, is maybe the rumored deal with the Cavaliers. I don't hate that. That adds some depth. That brings you your starting center, and your starting lineup then would look something like, and this goes back to Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, of Dejounte Murray, CJ McCollum. Let's say Trey Murphy for right now, because I think you need more shooting, especially if you get a non-shooting center. Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, and Jared Allen. If you go and get a guy like Miles Turner for Brandon Ingram, and I don't know if they can do that, a 3-point shooting, court spacing big man, like that's even more of a game changer for the Pelicans here. Then you can keep starting Herb, I think, because you get spacing from that center position. This just opens up, because you didn't give up Brandon Ingram in this trade, like a world of possibility. When I say this was really good work by the front office, like I truly mean that. You got to give them their credit here on this sort of thing. They did a really good job. They are going for it. Give credit to ownership for saying, let's spend. Let's spend. This also might mean that they're going, well, actually, let's talk about that. There's a couple other fallout things, including something that's hilarious with the Lakers too. Hilarious with the Lakers in this. That if you want to laugh at the Lakers, I've got 2 things for you here. But there's a couple of other fallout pieces from this that I think are important too. So let's look at those coming up here next in a bonus episode, trade breakdown episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to, FanDuel is going to let you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Look, you want to get in on some of the future action on the Pelicans? They're the betting favorite for DeAndre Ayton per FanDuel right now. That's a name maybe to keep an eye on. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. And if you're an everydayer, you're not shocked by some of this stuff, right? And if you're not an everydayer, you should be, because we're filling you in on everything you want to know about this team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell a friend about the show. And join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We'll probably do another live show later in the week. And look, got off a plane, recording for you right away. We wanted to get this out. I wanted to break it down. I wanted to really look at the salary cap too, about how this just opens up a variety of moves. And there is some work that still needs to be done with this team, with Dejounte Murray's shot selection. And then what's the next piece? So we just talked a little bit about that, right? Brandon Ingram likely traded. That's probably how they're going to acquire, at this point, maybe a high-level center. Think big. Love that. That also might mean, because there's a couple of things around this team being uncertain, and that they are hard capped at the first apron. They can't go above that number. And that number is, I'll tell it to you, in total salary. Where did my sheet go? I might have closed it. No, here it is. That number is $178,655,000. You can't go above that number. They're about, right now, $12,053,503 away by my math. That might be just slightly off. So, because there's so many kind of uncertain things, are they going to maybe trade Brandon Ingram and bring more salary back? Are they going to trade him and it's going to be a little bit less? This might be that they wait on free agency till that trade gets done. Because if you sign too many players, say you sign that full 12.9 non-taxpayer mid-level exception, that limits Brandon Ingram trades. You want to leave that door wide open as much as possible. So I think that could mean that they are a little bit quiet, potentially, on the free agent side of things. So don't panic if some names go off the board or anything like that. One, they weren't going to sign anyone big in free agency anyway. The next big move is going to be the Brandon Ingram trade. I want as many possibilities on the table for that sort of thing. So that's where I think they might be a little bit quiet. And I think at this point, they've earned a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. So don't panic if free agency happens and nothing exactly happens just yet for New Orleans. They're likely going to fill out the rest of the roster with this trade from Brandon Ingram. So a couple of other notes and things from this trade, because there's two things with the Lakers that I kind of find hilarious. So one, they had been linked to Dejounte Murray at the trade deadline and this offseason too. And the Pelicans just used a Lakers pick to get this guy. So the Lakers maybe could have made a move for him, but because of this piece of the Anthony Davis trade, right, we're going to look at what the Anthony Davis trade led to if and when Brandon Ingram is traded in this deal, because there's pieces of it in there. That is, it prevented the Lakers from getting Murray, essentially, right? Like, it prevented the Lakers from getting Murray, and I think it's kind of funny because maybe if they had their pick next year, they would have been able to use it in a deal, and they can't. And so it helped them. The other kind of hilarious part of this is now that the Hawks own a Lakers pick, they're not going to trade Trae Young there and make that pick worse. They want the Lakers to fail next season. They want the Lakers to fail next season, so they're not going to really do anything to try and help them get better. Now, I don't think they're going to trade Trae Young anyway, so that's kind of a moot point, but it's still kind of funny that not only did the Pelicans prevent them from getting a player they might have wanted, but they're also now got that guy instead, right? Stole it from them in a sense. They're also preventing them from maybe getting another guy that they wanted. So that's, I don't know, just kind of funny to me with this sort of thing. I also want to shout out the players that are going to Atlanta in the deal. Dyson Daniels has a lot of potential. That gives them a wing that can defend. A little bit superfluous with Herb Jones, but it was fun to watch both those guys kind of lock down other players. His offense just never came around, but there's a lot of potential there. And it was just, I don't know, like a good teammate, like a good dude on the team. EJ Liddell, we barely knew you. I was very high on him. That injury in Summer League kind of really derailed the start of his career, so I'm rooting for him. And then Larry Nance Jr., before we even get to kind of who he was in the locker room and his play on the court, like what just like a good person, someone who embraced New Orleans fully and was active in the community from like day one for every second that he was here. Every second he was here, he was just doing the right things. You've got to love that. From doing spaces, from coming on my show, wanting to talk about kind of where they are and being so open and transparent with all of that, but also, providing school lunches for kids this past year and this summer. From doing the jerseys where he donated his jersey from every game and did an auction. The Jose Alvarado jersey actually was from that, right? And all of that money was getting donated to a school for those bids and everything. Like, a dude who just comes in and embraced New Orleans and did right by the community, was involved in the community, did more in his short time here than people who have spent much longer here. Like, regardless of what you think about him as a player, I thought he was actually not as bad as people wanted to make him out to be last season. You've just got to like take your hat off to that guy and like thank him for what he did in the community and what he did in New Orleans. Look, he did more than like elected officials did here. He deserves all of the praise for that sort of thing. You know, Griffin often talks about the human element and it comes out as kind of like word salad, used car salesman speech, but that stuff does matter to us. And Larry Nance Jr. was the embodiment of that, I think. And that's going to make me remember him very fondly and just kind of root for him wherever he is. So, you know, we're going to kind of miss him. He's also a key player for the team at times. He shouldn't have been starting third quarters last season, but that's not him. That's on the coach. But, you know, as a player, he kind of played through injury. He did everything you wanted from him, was a good locker room guy. Like, just, you know, did everything, like I said, did everything you wanted during his time here on and off the court. Other news, by the way, James Borrego, and I heard this late on Thursday, that he had pulled his name out of the running for the Detroit job. He's going to be staying here. I don't see him going to the Lakers or the Cavs or anything like that as an assistant coach. I don't think they're going to let him do that sort of thing. Borrego come back. He finally gets kind of the guy to like lead his offense, and they can ease some of the burden here on Zion Williamson. So, made for my plane flight to be super interesting. I will tell you that. I told you, I'd kind of heard it was coming. It was like, oh, great. Of course it's going to happen while I was in the air. So rush to get this out for you. More on this. We might do another bonus show tomorrow, too. There might be a Sunday show. We'll definitely have more on Monday. I want to get into Yves Missi. You know, I'm growing on the pick a little bit, watching more of him and what he's going to do. And from talking to people around the organization, around him, too, I think this is the Jackson Hayes comps are not accurate at all, and we shouldn't say that. I get that why, but I don't think there's anything remotely close in terms of work ethic or anything like that. So more on that, you know, what this team could look like, more Brandon Ingram trades, because now, look, we're looking at centers when it comes to that. So fun time to be a Pelicans fan. As we told you here, the offseason is just getting started. Don't panic. There's a whole lot more to come. There's going to be a whole lot more coming. So I appreciate y'all for making Locked On Pelicans now part of your evening when this is getting released. You know, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the #1 Pelicans podcast. Tell a friend about the show, please. And as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, @NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all next time.